Welcome back to Black Girl Couch Reviews. I'm your girl, Christina. We are back for another recap and review. This one of Star Trek Discovery, Season 2, Episode 1, entitled Brother. So we are back for a new 14 explosive episodes of Star Trek Discovery. I did not record the first season of the show. I considered going back and doing a rewatch before I jumped back into this season, but I did not, and I'm glad that I did not because it totally was unnecessary. And they did a nice, 1 minute recap of last season, so you got all the points. And some things, since this is kind of a soft reboot, at least that's what I felt in the intro to the second season, that it's best that I didn't go back and watch a lot of the things that inspired me to really get into Star Trek in the first season. Just some quick background, I would be considered a newbie. I have watched some of the previous movies. I do remember Next Generation with Picard, and I remember that movie so well because Whoopi Goldberg was in it. And I was like, are these two about to hook up? Because it was funny in that movie. I don't know why. But other than that, I kind of came in on the J.J. Abrams reboot of the series. And I can see, since I have listened to a lot of podcasts from last season, that there was a lot of back and forth between the old fans and not having a lot of happiness with the current Star Trek Discovery because it, quote unquote, wasn't their Star Trek. And I get people needing to respect things that are from their what they remember of a TV show, their nostalgia. I have those moments when, I'm watching The Flash and it doesn't sometimes feel like the Flash that I'm comfortable with, but I never seem to really, I wouldn't say comfortable with, that's a wrong term, familiar with, I should say. But they have all of the essence that is in the Flash comics. So although I'm not, say, getting Bart Allen, which I thought maybe, but someone crushed my dreams on that, for the future seasons of The Flash, that does not take away from the fact that it still feels like comic book Flash in the essence of the show. So I do feel like, from the little I have known of Star Trek, that the new seasons and the Abrams being the one that brought that old season into this new century, that it was a good combination, that they have the essence of Star Trek, but it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit darker, a little bit more in line and in tone with where we are in the world today. And some people can have a really hard time attaching themselves to that, and that's fine. Don't watch. I don't like people who sit there and watch something just to hate watch it and then jump into everyone else's comments when they're excited about it just to shit on it. That's just unproductive, and go somewhere else. No one asked you to watch this show. And I think for someone that's like me, that really wasn't attached to a lot of the old incarnations of the show and kind of getting into it of what I know of the show and then what J. Abrams have done, that this first season of Star Trek Discovery was a really good, for the most part, I'm not saying it didn't have its issues, season for me to really start rooting for these characters in this what would you call it, franchise at this point, going forward. So they got a new fan, which is something I think that the producers were looking to, because as much as everyone wants to complain about how it's not old Star Trek, let's not sugarcoat the shit. It was a dead series, and they chose to add a lot of things onto it to give it more life so that it can get a new type of run on television. And I think that if you are a stan if you are it's true, if you're a stan of Star Trek, that you would be totally happy to at least see it get a second chance or get a little bit of a remaking. And there's nothing wrong. I hate people who are so attached to things that they can't bend. I mean, that's like and I hate to say it, make America great again. What? Go back to the years of slavery? Because that was the majority of our history. Is America, for the majority of its history, has been a slave or segregated state. So when people say things to me like, oh, I need to make America great again, my thing is, what? Like, why are you wanting to go back to something that was so, had no progression to it? So I kind of feel the same way about the Star Trek franchise at this point, that give the showrunners a chance to take something that was good and make it great again by introducing concepts that people follow. And I hate to say it, but darkness sells. I mean, when you have too much cookie, Flash did it last season where they were trying to go overly, oh, we're chipper. And even though they did go back to the darker tone towards the ender part of the season, that's also when it got interesting to me. So again, I try to be respectful to the different types of spectrums, but at the same time, we're adults. You have to give at some point, and I think that if this show is not for you, then that's when you need to go have some seats and let the rest of us enjoy it. I really miss Lorca this entire episode. I have hopes and dreams that he is going to come back as Prime Lorca, or even, I'm even fine with Mayor Lorca. Sorry, because even though he was a bad character, or quote unquote had a very un-Star Trek like feel to him, if y'all brought Michelle Yeoh's ass back to be whatever, redeemed, I don't see any reason. I don't get the dichotomy between why everyone is so up Michelle Yeoh's ass regarding her character, but it was, oh my God, Lorca. And he literally was the most fascinating thing last season that kept me interested in this show and what he was doing and opening up those doors to that. I kind of like that idea that we were kind of seeing the flip side of Star Trek, that this is not going to be it's not going to be a follow-up on some of, because that's another complaint. Well, this doesn't fit into the canon of Star Trek. Again, I can't express enough my frustration with that. It would have been fine for me to see this as, everyone has a dark side to their whatever, like basically using America. We have the CIA, we have the FBI, we have those shady government intel, sides that, hey, we may have seen all the good, but we're not going to see what happened on those black site files that may have put us in a less than ideal like to our counterparts, or to the lesson that we're trying to put out there. And I was okay with seeing the show like that, of seeing this other take onto, what would be happening on the flip side, because in war, you need to win war. And I think it's very naive to say, oh yeah, we're just going to all live out there in this positive thing. Yes, you're going to have this thing of what Starfleet wants to accomplish, but to accomplish that, don't tell me you're not going to have to bend some of those philosophies that you are expounding so well. So I was really into that concept, and I kind of feel like it got yanked for me just a bit, even though it did get much better in the second half of the season. I think Context for Kings of last season is still one of my favorite episodes. It was a great introduction to the Michael Burnham and what we were going for. And then from there, I really enjoyed the season. But let's face it, once we got to Mirror Universe, that's when things really popped off. And it also, unfortunately, took a very different turn and kind of rushed a few things, and I felt like we didn't get enough time to really delve into it's almost like they got halfway through and then which I know though that they filmed it all at the same time, right? So I'm not sure exactly where the break, but it did feel a little inconsistent, especially what they did to the Lorca character. Even though he was fascinating still, they kind of switched it on its head, like we were supposed to be rooting for what is Michael Yeoh's character even called? Michelle Yeoh. Michael Yeoh. whatever, her, it kind of like we shifted, like we were supposed to have our allegiance to her all this time, or they just made a decision behind the scenes. But I mean, I knew that the actor Jason Isaacs, he's a huge star, or he does a lot of, movies. So it was not realistic in a lot of ways to think that CBS was going to keep him for more than one season. However, he made, I hate to say it, but he made such a great impact on the first season that it was almost unnecessary how they killed him off. And then they killed him off with very little resolution, in my opinion, onto his story, because it despite what he did, he you can't take away from the fact that he really bred this crew to handle a lot of what they were handling tonight. You cannot, it's kind of like, I hate going back to the Flash reference, but it's where I'm at right now. But going back to, say, Thawne's an evil person. However, despite Barry knowing that, he cannot shift his impact on what he taught him and how that affects him today and some of his mindset. He imprinted himself on there. And I think he definitely imprinted himself on this crew. And I feel like despite the little bit of context we got in this episode, it was not nearly enough that we didn't get as much. And we still don't know where the fuck Prime Lorca is. If he's dead, if anyone's looking for him. I guess we're gonna get into that at the end of the season, maybe. But I know there's definitely a lot of people like me online that just really, really like the Lorca character and where we could have went with him and how that could have really put a different spin on the show. And I'm not saying, because I feel like this episode, I'm guessing, I even saw a lot of comments online that this was back to the basics of the Star Trek that people are used to seeing. But I'm not saying some of those tropes aren't good, getting an introduction to more than 2 or 3 characters, knowing the names of the people on the bridge. These are important things that, build out the Star Trek lore, in which, hey, this is kind of how we had the formula before, where we did get to touch base with a lot more characters. So I'm okay with adding those elements, but at the same time, I don't want it to lose its edge, I want to say, that it had in the first season, where I just really didn't know where we were going. And I like that. I like that I didn't have to think, oh, this is going to work out at the end of the day. I like the feeling of maybe this just ain't going to work out at the end of the day. And I will say I didn't take too many points off from this episode, despite me missing Lorca so much. I really did. That they did keep some of that. I just don't know how much we're going to go with that. And they did have a lot in this episode. I'm not saying this was bad. Actually, I really like it. I gave it an 8.6 rating. It's just, I have concerns, but I will say in the beginning and then by the end of the episode, I had less concerns. So yeah, Lorca was from the Mirror universe. He had commandeered the ship Discovery. I guess he and the original crew, the SS Shinzo, is that what it was? It had swapped places or something to that effect, where Mirror Universe Lorca ended up over here, and his goal was to get back to his world so that he could continue in his quest to overthrow the Emperor. So it was Empress Giorgio, and they kind of already, which is why I really didn't get why people were jumping on his ass. But he came from a different world, right? In which the Federation in the Mirror universe were the quote unquote hunted, like the ones that, it wasn't a war with Klingons, it was a war with the Federation. So it was everything flipped on its side. So in order to destroy the enemy, you had to be more ruthless, and Giorgio kind of was not what the Empire needed, even though she was completely evil, mind you, which everybody is just like throwing that off. Like, she can be saved. Fuck that. She was completely and utterly evil. She was just as messy as Lorca was. A lot of people threw this out there that Lorca was kind of some child molester. That's reaching for me. I get that you guys may not like the concept of, hey, there's this captain, and he happened to know this. He was supposed to be this father figure to Michael Burnham when she was a child, but once she came into adulthood, their relationship turned to a much more sexual relationship, and a lot of people had an issue with that. And I ain't gonna lie, I was crack shipping the hell out of Lorca. And I will say crack ship instead of ship. I don't ship anybody in this show, including Michael with, what's his face? I'll get Tyler. Ash Tyler, I don't ship that either, because I consider all these relationships to be very problematic, as well as not necessarily in the best interest of Michael Burnham. So while I, wasn't defending Lorca's, complete arc with his relationship with Michael Burnham, I felt there was a history that he had known with his Michael Burnham, and then that Michael Burnham had begun to start shifting his mindset by the time that he was conquered, which is why he wanted to keep her there, because there was something about her that was special. Because although his Michael was more one note and more in line to what he wanted, she lacked that compassion that the Prime Lord Michael Burnham had. And he, despite not wanting to be affected by that, it rubbed off on him as well. So I do think that there is a difference in how they handled what was going on with Lorca and what had happened to Lorca. And we could have still explored so much more of his character, but when it was found out, it turns out that Michael, because Georgiou looked like the person she most was familiar with, decided to side with her, mainly because she was mostly betrayed by that Captain Lorca. And was he gonna let them go? I can't remember. He said if Michael stayed, he was gonna let the Discovery go. And it did seem like he was gonna be true to his word on that, but of course Michael teamed up with Georgiou, betrayed them, and then in the most asinine move I will ever recognize on this series thus far, she decides to save evil Georgiou because she thinks that she can be saved. But apparently we can see this in Mirror Universe Georgiou, but for some reason it's just not easy to compute with Mirror Universe Lorca, who had more of a case for maybe a redemption arc, so to speak. So, and then everyone who says the same thing, it starts to ship Georgiou and Michael, even despite the fact that both the actress and the both actresses, I say, have clearly defined this as a mother-daughter relationship. The fact that the Georgiou thinks it's okay to turn that relationship sexual. Y'all don't have no beef with this, but y'all mad when Lorca does it. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy, and that's what I didn't like. I get if you're going to say this is not healthy and I don't like it and why, but at the same time, don't then turn around and talk out of your ass on the other side of the spectrum when it applies to that. It applies to Ash Tyler. He's someone who he is not, and despite, yes, he's got this other side of him that loves Michael, he also has this other side of him that killed Hugh, that betrayed Michael, who would have turned on her if L'Rell hadn't did what she did to try to save both people. Or did she get rid of Volk and then she saved Tyler? I think that's what she did. So it's just to me on all sides of it. So I'm not really rooting for any of that, but I at least I enjoyed the dynamic between Michael and Lorca more because it wasn't so overstated. And we ended up leaving off where L'Rell and Ash, I guess she's the command, she's in charge now. They're the ones that ended the Klingon War. So they've all come to live in peace despite the 5 years of them warring it on. And I guess Georgiou just goes out into the night. She gets a complete and utter free pass. I still don't like that. And I'm sure that's going to bite Burnham in the ass in the end in some capacity. So I even like the fact that everybody's like, oh, yeah, she's completely and utterly someone who shouldn't be here. I don't like... Anyway, let's move on. That's season 1. Didn't want to spend all day on season 1, but that's where we kind of left our characters out. Saru got in charge of the Discovery. Michael Burnham has been reinstated to a science officer on the vessel after all of her heroics last season. So despite her being Starfleet's first mutineer, her heroism has got everything forgiven, and they get a hail, and that's where we start the episode off with, from the U.S. Enterprise. They are hailed by a Captain Pike on their way to Vulcan. Before I get into it too much, let's get the schematics out of the way. It was directed by Alex Kurtzman, who everyone from Star Trek should be very familiar with, and it was written by Ted Sullivan, Gretchen J. Berg, and Aaron Herbert. So they're on their way to Vulcan. They get hailed, and they cannot interpret this message from Captain Pike. But even prior to that, we get a voiceover from Michael Burnham, and she's saying the same thing: space, the final frontier, you know, new entry into the world, and blah, blah, blah. You know, the very Star Trek-ish type of dialogue. But she's telling about a story on how the old people used to get together and talk about the skies, because they never understood the universe, and so they would come up with stories. And there was this one story about a girl who threw ash into the sky, and that's what built the Milky Way. And they are always looking for a message and for anyone to seek it, and you have to have your heart open to receive that message. And we transition from that into a flashback where we see the young Michael Burnham. I like the slow-mo. I like the way they filmed this whole scene and how it does its 180 to the end of the episode. It was very artistically well styled. And as she's coming to her new home, we see Sarek talking to Amanda. So Amanda's going to have a part in this series, which I like, since she dead now from the television series or from the movies. So we never got to really know her all that well. And she's played with Winona Ryder, right? In the I can't say his name. J.J. Abrams version. So Sarek is saying, hey, a child is coming. She's human, orphaned. And Amanda's like, she's human. Like, she is so happy to have another human person on this earth. And as she's meeting Amanda, Michael, that is, she does not want to be touched. And Amanda lets her know, I was you, Michael, all my life. Like, you have now come to this place called Vulcan, and now you are being introduced to a society in which your human characteristics are not particularly valued, but they are in a way. So trust me, girl, I got you. And they are able to bond more easily, and they see Spock looking over the balcony, kind of looking at them. He's curious, and she says, you want to meet my son. So they go to meet Spock, Sarek, and Michael. Her and Michael are holding hands, and as they go to his room, Spock is drawing. And that's huge. That room is huge. I love the color setting too, because everything in Star Trek Discovery does sometimes feel a little dark when you go out to the space element. So it's nice to see these huge bright colors. But Sarek is like, look, we got someone coming to live with us. I want you to teach her the ways of Vulcan, and I do expect you to be friends. And Spock lets all of his human side show, because he draws like a dragon and then throws it up in the, kind of transposes it from the tablet to the air. And he basically showing like, bitch, get out of here. She didn't take the hint when he was putting the dragon. She's just all fascinated. And she puts out her hand to introduce himself. And you think he's about to shake her hand, and he closed the door right in her face. Like, we're not doing this. I don't like this. I'm thinking he made that monster just to scare her. Like, girl, go away. But she was not scared at all. So that tells you a lot about Michael, right? She just wanted a friend, and Spock is just like, nah. He had to know what happened to her, right? So he doesn't, and that's the whole thing. Spock doesn't know empathy, but there's a line where Burnham says in this episode, no, Spock has more empathy than you realize. Like, his human side is more there than I think Sarek realizes. And I think that Michael wanted to be more Vulcan all this time. That was her whole arc from season 1, is I'm not in touch with my human side. I'm in touch with my Vulcan side. So I can see how that could have caused problems if Sarek was the one that wanted her to teach Spock empathy, but he had it and she didn't. And she was more the Vulcan one of the two. So that's a very interesting relationship to explore in the future. We get to the Enterprise, and they are still flagging their distress signal, but it's too distorted for anyone to interpret. Tilly does come in to suggest Morse code after babbling entirely too much. I miss Tilly, but I didn't miss Tilly. Now, I have not watched any of the Star Trek shorts. I'm sorry, wasn't interested. So I didn't get much of the backstory into Tilly. But when she came back on screen, I was like, oh. And there was a line that Stamets says to her later, and I was like, yes. I love Tilly from first season, but I almost felt like they took a back seat almost immediately on some of her scenes in this season, and this was one of them. But I did like when she says, you guys need to use Morse code. We find out that it's a Mr. Bryce, his name. He works comms, and then Helm. I still didn't get her name. I need to get everyone's names. I hate learning 50 million names, which is why I didn't have that complaint last season. I don't need 50 names because I have to keep track of them. But she says that the Enterprise is a beauty despite not being able to hail anybody. Bryce is finally able to figure out the message. Captain Pike is requesting to come on board USS Discovery, and he is bringing with him an engineer and a science officer, but they can see that something is going wrong with the Enterprise. Like, their comms are down, like everything's messed up over there. Saru is like, Burnham, you come with me. We're gonna go meet Pike and his engineer and science officer. And you see this look in Burnham's face, and I didn't know what it was at first until Sarek says to her, I was not expecting to see Spock again. And she's like, oh, me either. So that's when we know that, and I don't know why I didn't put it together, because I've watched the movies, that Spock is on US Enterprise. That's where he was assigned when he graduated from the academy with I was expecting maybe a cameo from, y'all know who I'm talking about, Captain Kirk. But no, and I'm glad that he wasn't on. I don't think we need to shove all these characters down people's throats. I mean, the fact that we have a lot of Sarek, even though he's leaving, thank goodness. I did not want too many of the other members from the other television series to start coming into this one, because I want to see this from, again, that a different angle of the story and not the same story. And that does allow for the characters to do certain things that maybe you would not if you brought an old cast member in. You run into more that you wouldn't do that. So I was like, oh, okay. So that explains why Burnham has that look. They go, I love the shot of the outside of the ship looking into the ship as they're walking down the hallway, and Saru is speaking to Burnham alone, and he's asking her, hey, you anxious to see Spock? Or I heard that your brother is an officer on US Enterprise, and she's clearly anxious to see him. And Michael tries to play it off like, no, I'm more about what's happening with the Enterprise. And Saru, I love that he actually smelled her, because he's like, after she says that's what I'm thinking about, and he's like, sure, Jan. And finally, Michael lets a little bit and asks Saru, do you have any siblings? And he says, yeah, I actually do. I have a sibling named Sarana. And we know that Michael and Saru, their stories kind of parallel. So I love that we to have both of them at the same place where they're estranged from their siblings. And he tells her that basically we got beef. There's terrain that we cannot traverse. And Michael says, I know the feeling. So that's when we finally get the first indication that there's actually bad blood between her and Spock. Captain Pike is beamed aboard the USS Discovery along with I did not get the girl's name. I know Connolly because he was such a douche, but he introduces himself to Saru and tells him, hey, so I know you didn't get the message, because Saru's like, I ain't get a message from Starfleet talking about how I'm about to take over your ship, because Saru's kind of like, hey, because we've got no word from Starfleet and that code that you just popped off, I didn't catch it. He states that there are 3 contingencies that would allow you to take over my ship for the most part. And I believe it was threat to his ship, threat to the citizens of Earth, or no other captain was available. And he asked, well, which one of these 3 contingencies are you coming aboard and taking over my ship for? And he says all 3. So I'm like, oh, Saru just got shot for 5 seconds. Then they already trying to yank his shit from him. He can't ever. He want to be a captain so bad, and no one is just letting him be his captain. He gets it for 5 seconds. And I did you catch the look between his peeps, Connolly and the other chick? Because it didn't look like they were surprised when he said, when Pike said, I'm taking over your ship. They're just like, say, what now? But nothing ever seemed to come to fruition with that. So maybe that just was, they just didn't think that was the play. They thought maybe they were getting assistance. But as they are going through the ship of the Discovery, the first thing the one chick says, she says that, this is where all of Starfleet's money went. And Pike says, do not cover thy neighbor's spaceship. And he brings up the fact that, hey, at least we got new uniforms, which they are very colorful, as Michael points out, and it looks very much J.J. Abrams, so it's keeping that consistency. So for those that are complaining about it, where does Discovery fall into the timeline, I think we're going to get a lot more answers to that. Pike and the U.S. Enterprise have been discovering these red bursts. And there were 70 of these red bursts. They are naturally caused. And the faux Spock, Connolly, science officer, is saying that they can't figure it out. It's not a moon. They can't get down to it. Every time they got near it, I guess it fucked up their ship. I love the scene in the elevator as they are about to get on the elevator anyway, because that's when, as Michael was talking, they were saying something about a simile. I didn't really catch too much of that dialogue. I was too busy writing about the faux Spock, because I was like, he really is arrogant. He's really trying to impress Michael and his captain. And Pike he's like, who is this chick? And he asks, like, who are you? And she goes, Michael Burnham. And he's like, oh, okay. He said you were smart. So obviously Spock be talking family business on the ship. And Michael finally, says what she wanted to say the entire time. I thought Spock was going to be with you. I thought I was going to see him. And he tells her to keep her expectations low, then you'll never be disappointed. So, like, girl, do you even know who your brother is? The man we got to deal with. So I wondered at that point, and we find out at the end how much Pike knows. But he doesn't know nearly as much, but I think he knows more than he's letting on. They all get onto the elevator. I love it. It's this alien there. They use it for a little bit of comedic relief. Everyone gets on. They're just all like, excuse me. And Michael makes conversation with him like, oh, you don't look like you're so well. And she's able to communicate with him because she's like that. And we get that he has a cold. But then they start picking up exactly where the conversation left off. Saru thinks it may be a black hole or a tear in space. Hey, we got some experience with that. And they state that, hey, when we try to get next to it, it won't stabilize enough for us to get close. And then it knocked out all of our systems on the Enterprise when we Pike Pike asks for some codes, and Saru is like, I cannot do that, and you know why, because when you take command of a ship, you need to put in your DNA for authorization in front of the entire crew. And before I know, at first I did think, my brain was like, oh, why didn't Lorca do that? Well, he was assigned to the U.S. Discovery prior to Michael being beamed aboard, so it makes sense that he had did that in front of his crew, probably when he was first assigned to the ship. And then what was his name? I don't know what the alien's name is. I'm sorry. But he sneezed on faux Spock, and I thought it was hilarious because I feel like he was just doing it because, like, I sense what's going on. I don't like this Conley dude anyway. But to his credit, he didn't be like, "Come on, dude." He's just like, "Okay, bless you." They get onto the bridge. Tilly starts rambling entirely too much. I didn't like this at all. The only part that was funny about it is when she's like, well, I don't want to tell you to move your pinky, but I need you to move your pinky. And she goes to move it, and he goes, ow. And then he's like, I'm just kidding. And she's like, okay, good. I thought I broke a captain. And I like that Pike takes the moment because his whole service record goes up on the screen, and she's like, oh, sorry about that. And he's like, no, go ahead. Let everybody see. Let's be transparent. Let's address the elephant in the room. Your last captain took command of the ship, and you guys witnessed that, and he was a liar. Now, I don't feel like they should stop stating that he lied about being a Starfleet captain. He was never, yes, he lied, but it's not like he was ever a part of Starfleet, right? It's like an imposter took over for our captain, Starfleet Lorca, and he's the one that has been driving this ship in the battle of this war. And let's be real. I'm sorry. I don't care. He did a good job. He kept them alive because Pike was on the ship for one day and they all got a casualty. I'm just pointing out facts. Okay. Look, I love Lorca. And he basically says, look, I'm transparent. You guys were in the middle of a war with the Klingons that the last time we investigated anyway, something like this is how we ended up with war with the Klingons. So we gonna do this shit right. And I was like, oh, we gonna side out Burnham for that? It's like, look, I trust you, Burnham. You redeemed yourself, but let's not repeat the same mistakes. So they want to know, hey, is this red burst a declaration of war, or is it something is it a hello? We need to investigate more. He officially transfers the command, Saru that is, to Captain Pike. He sits in his chair and he says, let's go after this signal. After he gets everyone on board, they go into warp speed. So they're not using the spore drive. Keep that in mind, folks. Because I know that's a huge beef from last season as well. Like, what's up with the spore drive? It clearly was not used in the timeline where Enterprise is in, and we all know that this spore drive is connected to Stamets, and Stamets is connected to the spore drives, and this is all going to probably, like, this series is going to, whatever's going to happen here, and we get an introduction to Black Badges in, I guess, Section 31 in some of the previews for this season. So my guess is whatever happens with this spore drives, it's going to go into some classified ass files. So I thought that was very self-explanatory to me first season, not even knowing anything too much about Star Trek, that this was something that didn't work out because it was very disastrous in the end. So it's not just in the same way that we never knew about the first mutineer, that whatever Michael Burnham's story is going, or where it's going to end, it's not going to be a place where we're going to be talking about it years in the future. It's going to be very much buried somewhere. So I've always kept that in mind with this series, and I would encourage fans, in my opinion, to do the same thing. But they do warp, and just as we're wondering, as the warp speed looks awesome as they're coming out of it, we go to Stamets, and he is listening to old messages from Hugh. They're talking about the opera, or Hugh loves the opera, and he's telling him, hey, I got us 2 tickets. I know that you don't like to go, but you do it for me, and I love that you do it for me. And he tells Tilly, who is completely oblivious to this because they're changing that engineer room to go back to a standard engineer room, and they're actually going to give Hugh a lab, or not Hugh, Stamets a lab, because Tilly is oblivious to his pain right now, despite him saying, I now know why Hugh loved the opera. She has been in charge of allocation on the ship and is drunk on her power, and has kicked the person who has this really huge lab into a closet and given Stamets that lab. But he does not want it. He doesn't want his equipment. He is clearly still struggling with the death of the love of his life, and he's told her that, hey, I had accepted a position on Vulcan as a teacher, and it has only been postponed because of what Pike is doing right now. But I'm done with this. Like, I can't do this. I get that you want to continue to explore the spore drive, my own resource or research. However, I see Hugh everywhere. He's in these memories. I can't get away from him, and it's too painful for me to right now. And I'm like, well, just go in the web network and be with him, which I think he's eventually going to. And I love that they didn't keep Stamets in a funk or bench him for really long, and then that his natural curiosity would get him away from his own depression, because I don't feel like it's natural for his character that he would completely shut down, especially after seeing how he took such command at the end of last season, that he would just go into a recluse mode. I think that he is now re-energized by what's happening, and that he's just afraid of these haunted memories of Hugh. But Tilly does try to tell him, yeah, I understand that this ship is haunted by his memories, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And Stamets is like, look, I was commandeered, me and Hugh, onto this ship. My research was commandeered. Everything I wanted to know about the mycelial network and the spore drive, I've lived a lifetime, and I've lost everything that I could have loved in the accomplishment of figuring out more with this spore drive. So I don't want to do that. I do love the line he says. He's like, Tilly, you're going to make a great captain, but repeat after me. I will say fewer things. Yes, please. That is a lesson she really does need to learn. We go back to Michael. And at first when I saw all of those candles, I was like, girl, that's how you create fires. But we find out those are fake candles, which I like. But when she's reading Alice in Wonderland, she likes to recreate the moment where Amanda was reading to her as a child with all the candles. And as she's reading to her as a child, they have a little bit of flashback, and she says, where's home? And Michael says that home is Earth. And Amanda says, I promise to take you there sometime, sweetheart. I don't know if she ever fulfilled that promise, but she definitely wanted to take her. And we see that Spock has been looking at them, and it looks like he smiled, right? And that is when Sarek comes to visit Michael in her room and tells her that, hey, I'm about to take off. I have been assigned to assemble a task force just in case this symbol is not all happy. And as he came into the room, I liked what he said, oh, habits die hard. And she says, or not at all. So she's just like, this is a safe place for me when I'm reading this book in this type of setting. It brings back good memories. And Sarek does reveal that, hey, I had been listening too, even though I was working. Amanda's voice is very calming in the household. And that's when we get the first mention that L'Rell has become High Chancellor, because they says, Michael asked, does the Klingons have anything to do with this? And he's like, no, I talked to High Chancellor L'Rell, and they don't know what the hell these symbols are either. So I love, though, that she didn't immediately go, well, how's Tyler? I'm never going to ship that. I'm sorry. If you're a shipper of that, I'm not going to shit on your ship, because I know I did that to this one girl on Tumblr. And I really did. And it was and I appreciate the fact that we had a constructive conversation about it. Because at first I was like shitting on it. I was just like, because I didn't say anything too bad other than the fact that I was like, I'm not rooting for this. And then she kind of got upset about it, like, hey, you can't, just go away if you don't like it. And I said, if someone posts something on my wall, on my Tumblr page, to me, I'm not going out to search for things to shit on. I come across it, and I feel like if it's on my page, I have, I'm having a dialogue with someone I'm following or who's following me. So that to me feels like I can have a conversation with them about it. And she pointed out that it was actually her post. So I don't know if we were following or not, or maybe someone reblogged it from her. And I immediately said, oh, no, my bad. It's your post. You have every right to want to only have positivity on your post. And I would suggest in the future that you might want to block me, because I'm not a fan of this romance. So I don't want to offend you in the future by not supporting that. So that's how I kind of feel about the Ash Michael relationship. I'm not going to just, if it's on my screen in an episode, I'm going to, make comments on how I feel. However, I'm not trying to actively disengage or upset that fandom. I don't see it like you guys see it. I don't see the chemistry between the actors. I thought Tyler was a good character. I like him on his own. I like his complexity as a character. I was not actively rooting for this romance. I kind of feel like it was rushed just a tad bit. I like the scene where they first were getting to know each other when they had the party. And then after that, I feel like it got revved up a little too quickly for me to really emotionally invest in. And then from there, it kind of got very muddy. And I didn't necessarily like how, Ash seemed to depend on her for his own emotional security. And I'm glad that he broke away from that in the end. And I would be fine with them keeping that as the story. But it doesn't seem like they're going that route, because, spoiler alert, in the season-long trailer, we see them kissing. So they're still going to explore that relationship. I'm just not going to be actively rooting for it. So we go back to Sarek and Michael. She finally asks what she really wants to ask. Why didn't Spock come on board? And she asked him, when's the last time you spoke to Spock? And he's like, it's been years. It's been years, girl. And we already know why they have a bad relationship. Even I know that Spock and Sarek do not really have a good relationship whatsoever. And he clearly joined Starfleet, which that we found out last season was a huge thing, that Sarek had to choose between his son and Michael to join Starfleet or the Vulcan Academy, and they were like, we're only going to take one of your half-bastard children. And Sarek made a choice. He chose Spock, and I'm pretty sure that probably got back to Spock, and he chose Starfleet. So now he has 2 children, half-bastards, in Starfleet, and none of them went to the Vulcan Science Academy, and that probably bums him out a little bit. It probably caused beef between them. And Michael says, well, I know what your plan was for me. Expose me to Vulcan lifestyle, the culture, show me these ways. But what did you have in mind for me when it came to Spock? What did you want him to learn from me? And he says empathy. I wanted him to be able to understand human emotion so that he could be able to, when he goes out in the world, understand people. And she points out that he could have learned this from Amanda, and he says, well, true, but he had a reverence for his mother, and we both know that reverence can fill up a room. And I wonder if that's something that Michael has for Spock, because it seems like she admires him a lot in a very reverent way, and we see that at the end of the episode, how she's, I don't know, I have siblings, but I don't go in their rooms and just touch their their uniforms and have a moment. I never had that. So I feel like she sees him as a brother, but also sees him as an idol or the ideal. I don't know whatever the fuck happened between them. At first I thought maybe they started seeing each other as more than brother and sister. Don't ask me why. I'm sorry. They're not really brother and sister. We know how this happened with The Flash. So I thought maybe that was something into it, but no, she calls him brother at the end, so I don't think they're going that route. And I ain't gonna lie, I would have been interested in either version. At this point, since we're doing the reboot, and we don't, like, is this supposed to be in the same time accuracy as the, because we know in the movies that basically history got rewritten when the Klingons came through and they started shit and they ended up they created their own Flashpoint, right? So that's the timeline that we were following in all of the movies, is the Flashpoint type of timeline in Star Trek history. And that's when Spock is with Nyota. So we got some stuff going on. Should I be silly? Yes, I am. I'm gonna be silly. He got a black girl. He got a black girlfriend and a black sister. I'm sorry, okay? Y'all know I'm trash, but I would have been perfectly fine exploring that dynamic. But I'm okay with the sibling thing too. She tells Sarek Sarek tells her that whatever I had in mind, I don't think that Spock ever really accepted you. And Michael thinks that no, he did for a time, and that he does not lack empathy. She says that in a matter of like, no, he is full of empathy and I am the actual problem. I was the Vulcan stone cold bitch, so to speak. And we know, and that's when Sarek picks up that, hey, something went down between you two and you're not telling me what it is, but I know I'm leaving the ship, but I'm going to be available if you ever want to, start talking about this family drama. But he leaves her with a bit of advice to, don't focus on the past, focus on what's in front of you right now, which is this damn signal. Pike does a roll call once we get back to the bridge, which is nice because it's a good way to introduce the crew in a very simplistic manner, because he says, hey, we're going on this mission. I need to know who the hell I'm rolling with. And other than Bryce, did he say Kayla? Yes, I think Kayla is the girl with the eyes. She was on the Shinzo. And I want to remember that one girl's name. I want to remember her name because I'm really interested in her character along with the dreads. And I was wondering if her and Kayla had a thing going on. They get hit by a shit ton of rocks once they get to the coordinates that they were looking for. And I love Pike's line. He says, I was expecting a red thing. Where's my red thing? He has a very Pike. He reminds me of Pike, but not a Pike. He's not as Kirk is, but he does have some Kirk elements to him. And they turn out that this was all a mirage, that the rock is the atmosphere. And Michael says that they do have microscopic cameras that can see what's happening because they can't. And he says, love it, do it. I love his little style. At the end, my final verdict on Pike is I do like him. I think that he's good. I think it's, who plays him? Anson Mount. He's a good addition. He feels like a traditional Starfleet track captain. And that's kind of good to see, just to stabilize the crew. I don't want him to stay on the crew, and it looks like he's going to. It's fine for this season if we come back. And I like that he did not change the ready room for Lorca. I don't care. Look, I will hashtag denial for the rest of my life. Prime Lorca coming back. Anyway, Michael notices that there is a Starfleet vessel down there, and there is no response from the ship. When Bryce tries to reach it via comms, she tells Saru, hey, you have better vision than humans, which is really cool because we found out last season that Saru can run like a fucking cheetah, and he uses his improved or better vision to see the ID on the ship. And they realize that it's a U.S. Enterprise ship that went down missing sometime during the war. And Pike wants to know, how do we get down there? Because he's not leaving an officer behind. He's getting really upset with Saru because everyone's basically telling him the same thing. Like, this is not advisable. We cannot risk, like, it's my job to tell you that we cannot be risking our crew to go down to there. It's a huge, let me tell you what the variables are. And he doesn't want to hear the variables. He's like, I'm fine hearing the variables, but they need to come with solutions. Because he had cut Michael off real quick when she was trying to talk to him as well. And Michael kind of gets snippy back with him, like, I was about to tell you the variable, but I was about to also tell you the solution. No one on this bridge is into the idea of leaving a Starfleet officer behind. So we are all on the same team. Just because we're giving you info doesn't mean that we aren't as passionate as you are to get our person, our brother in arms back. And she's like, if you're ready to listen, I got a solution. So they all, Connolly accompanies with the new chick, and Michael and Pike, and she says that we got 2 hours to beam down there. We got these little ships that will transport us through the rocks down there. And he says that's risky. And does he say it to Connolly? Like, yeah, he's like, Connolly, are you okay with the risk? And because Connolly's the one that's bringing up how risky it is. And he's like, yeah, but I'm totally cool with that risk. And Michael's like, yeah, I'm cool with the risk too. Yeah, we all know Michael is a risk taker. And I wondered at that moment if I was going to like the shit face person, and quickly, no. And then he did it. Tilly runs down to tell Michael that, hey, the spores got really crazy when we got close to this thing, so can you get me a sample? And Michael anyway, says that Stamets must be loving this, and she breaks the news to her that, hey, did you hear that Stamets is going to become a teacher on Vulcan, and I don't want to discuss it anymore because I'll start bawling like a baby. Just tell me that you're coming back because I can't lose 2 of my closest friends in one day. And then she realized that Michael can't really tell her that, and she says, well, just lie to me. And Michael says, Tilly, I'm coming back. The space shoots look really cool. I like that they're all different colored. I like that, again, the pop of color, because we saw entirely too much blue. So I do like the difference in the uniforms. They use the landing pods that Burnham had test piloted, and she tells her that, hey, I did 9 Gs in 11 minutes, and Connolly's like, did you though? So he's like, I think that's a stretch, and she says, for some of us, maybe. And that elicits a laugh, but Pike's like, come on now, settle down, guys. So there's definitely friendly competition between them, but we turn out it's not so friendly. He's just straight up jealous. And as they launch off, it's really cool. I like the special effects. They did a great job with the special effects all around this entire episode. We get debris. We got debris is what Michael yells out, and Connolly's like, no shit. The debris explodes around them, and Saru's threat gang look comes out, and it's just it's the most hilarious moment of the entire episode, because everyone doesn't say anything, but like this black officer is just looking at him, and he's like, come on now, what did you expect? Like, really, are you surprised? But the way the sound effect let out in that empty space, it was like he shit himself. Hilarious. Connolly continues to be arrogant when Michael tells him, you need to get behind me, this is too field. He's like, no, I can maintain this. He goes through the rocks and thinks he's all about himself. Pike is trying to tell him, no, get your ass behind Michael, she's right. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, I was roommates with someone at the academy, and as he's trying to tell why he's right, his whole entire ship gets knocked out by an asteroid and he explodes. I appreciate, despite that he deserved what he got, that Michael still was like, no. He was just being arrogant, and that's what you get when you do not listen to your superiors. Pike also gets hit by some debris, and he's about to eject because he has nothing going with his ship, and he can't eject because his helmet will not close. Michael asks that the Discovery get command of her, I guess, boosters on her suit. They're like, it's gonna take us a minute, and he's like, no, it's too risky. Pike is, I've already lost one man, I don't need anyone else. And she's just like, I got it, I'll catch you. Like, you need to go ahead and eject. They're gonna manually override you, and then we're gonna free fall to the ground, and then they're gonna to get my jetpack going. She gets below him after which I love that Michael has continued the I'm still a mutineer. Because he gave her an order, right? And she said, yeah, but come on now. You know my name, right? I'm Michael Burnham. I'm not going to listen to an order if I don't think it makes sense to me. And she tells him that you got to trust us. We got you. Ain't that right, ladies? And I love the look that they give each other. Just like, yeah, we totally got him. And he finally lets go. They are able to successfully do this outrageous maneuver, and they both eject. She catches him, and they are able to save them in the nick of time. And Kayla looked like she had just had the worst stress of her life, because what you call is smiling, but she's just like, oh Jesus. So it was a great good dramatization in the whole scene. So I really liked it. I was very much at the edge of my seat, wanting to know what was going to happen. I knew they were going to get saved, but I liked how they played it up. We get on to the HIAW. I don't know how you say that. How? They get to where the ship is. And I love that she had told the one chick to go down, we'll meet you there. And she totally was like, okay. So someone does listen. As they're looking around, they get a signal from an incoming target. It's actually Starfleet Tech. And that Starfleet Tech scans them and then starts talking to them. Like, hey, come on, we ain't got all day. Follow the kids. They go into an emergency containment zone. And they meet Commander Jet Remo, who is probably now my second favorite character behind Michael Burnham. I love her sarcasm. I love her pizzazz. I love her confidence. I love everything about her. She's an engineer. We need an engineer. So I think she'd make a great addition to Discovery. And I love that her and Burnham immediately are meshing well. She has been stuck here for 10 months and 11 days. The other people got away, but she stayed. And Pike looks a little surprised by that. Like, you stayed here for 10 months and 11 days. And she's like, well, what the fuck do you expect me to do? She's attached to her crew. And she's just kind of like, hey, I needed to keep them alive. And they point out that, hey, you're not a medical officer. And she points out that, hey, engineering is engineering. The body is just another, for the most part, tool. It's another thing to be hardwired and fixed. So she was able to keep her people alive. Like, I love the one where he needed a heart transplant, but there was no one to donate to him. So she was able to override his heart, take it out, and get it to continue to start working, even though it's not in his body. So she kept her crew members alive. That's been her mission. They were supposed to be going to Starbase 36. And Pike looks very impressed. Michael looks impressed. Everybody is impressed by her. I'm impressed. And they notice that the rock is moving, and she's like, yeah, what's going on with this? And Pike tells her what's going on, and they're like, we're here to rescue you, or something like that. She goes, oh, what a relief. I thought we were all going to die. Like, hey, what you're telling me is not good, and what are we going to do about it? Burnham is getting shit together. She goes and she's like, look, I can fix this. I'm going to reroute the power. I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And Jet is kind of like, where were you 10 months ago? I needed you. So she's probably like, finally someone has a brain that matches mine. Because Pike still looked slow to get on there. Pike asked Jet, what's up with this signal? It's 1 out of 7. Jet does not know anything about it. They are able to beam 6 injured personnel at a time onto the U.S. Discovery, but the debris is getting a lot worse where they're at, because this whole entire thing is about to implode, right? Because they got 2 hours to get there, 5 hours for it to completely go bye-bye. They are on to their last transport when the power dampens down. Burnham, I love the little slide she did, goes over there to reroute the power. Just as she is rerouting it, and it comes back on to transport them out, an explosion knocks her out of the transport room, and she's not able to be beamed out. and the planet is really starting to destabilize. And I like that she doesn't panic. Like, she's not one of those, like, she tries to open the door, she's not able to open the door. She immediately calls Discovery and says, hey, if you can hear me, track my signal. And she starts to haul ass a marathon as the entire ship is being destroyed behind her. I love the special effects. Despite her running this marathon, she's still knocked out by some debris. As she wakes up, the debris is embedded into her leg and she gives out this scream. I didn't know if I needed the scream, but it was to indicate that shit, this is painful. But just as she is feeling maybe a little hopeless, she sees in front of her what looks like this angel alien creature approaching her. And she can see it very clearly. I like the effects on it. I guess this is going to be the mystery. This is 1 out of 7. So is it destroyed here? And we're going to encounter more of this being on other places. I don't know. Or maybe this was, because I think they said this is the only one left out of the 7, right? So that's why it was so important to beam the asteroid, the missing a piece of it on board. And just as she thinks this creature's about to, we're going to get a closer look at the creature. It's a good transition. Pike jumps out and he's like, are you all right? And they beam aboard back on the Discovery because Pike came back to rescue her. I do like the budding relationship between her and Pike. I think that it's a good dynamic. It's less of the Pike and her dynamic. It always felt personal with her and Pike. It almost felt there was something there that I will just go back to the first season, or what did I say? Pike, Prime, Lorca. I always felt that there was a tension between her and Lorca. They trust each other. I do feel like Burnham liked more of what Lorca was putting down than maybe some of the other folks in the crew, and that's why they were always able to, they didn't have a bad bond. She just, in the end, her whole thing was, dude, you could have just told me and I would have helped you. Instead, you betrayed the crew and our trust, and that's why we're not on the same side. But it's not like I can't see where you're coming from. So I always love that about Burnham, is that she never, that's why she saved Giorgio. It was like, I don't hate you, or I can't see your perspective, or I may not necessarily agree. I might see some parts of your perspective that I agree with, because it always felt like they were more on the same page than they weren't, especially when it came to the more murky decisions. However, he could have told her. It was her thing. Like, I could have helped you get back to your world. And then once you got back there, what you and Giorgio could have been doing is what y'all doing. I can't tell you how to live your life, and you've lived your life in a different way, even if I don't agree with that way of life. Tilly, or just as they're beaming aboard, she tried to get the piece of sample, and it turns out that it was not able to be transported. Tilly is running through the hallway. She goes to see Burnham, and she's like, I don't care about the sample, I care about you. I'm so happy you came back. And Burnham's just like, no, let's talk about the sample. Like, I had it, Tilly. It could have been beamed aboard, but the whatever didn't pick it up. And they're both geeked out at the fact that no, that should have happened. It's impossible. It's an impossible thing. It's an energy that's completely sufficient that we were not able to beam it. And she says, we're the expounding mothers. This is going to change everything. Like, they're so happy to make us Discovery. And you have to remember that I like that they're getting back to the fact that they are science officers. I do like that part about it. I'm glad that we're done with the war and that we can move on for something other than what side's going to win. So I do like the mystery part of that. I do love the part. She's like, this is what you've been doing. You're supposed to be resting. She's like, yeah, well, I'm a terrible patient. And then out of nowhere, the doctor just comes by. Like, I second that. I like that little quip. Stamets sees Tilly getting all excited because she's like, beam that asteroid aboard. And he can't help but not be infected by that excitement for the new Discovery, because like I said, that's what brings them so close together, is the fact that they love and enjoy taking these risks, discovering these new things. So as they're getting ready to beam the asteroid back on board, And Stamets is like, yeah, I totally want to be in on this. And she's like, you're totally in on this. Pike gives back command to Saru. He says, my mission's over. My mission was to go to the red space, to go to the asteroid and figure out about this symbol. But right now you're going back into the science territory of figuring out this asteroid. So I'm going to give you back command of your ship. And I appreciated that, even though we found out it's very, very, very temporary. So the asteroid gets on board. We see Stamets is going to probably be invested in what happens with this. So I'm glad he's not going to be benched, and we're going to have Mopey Stamets. Pike is in Lorca's office, his old office anyway, and he comes across a fortune on the grounds, and we all know that was his thing. He reads it, and we don't see what it says, and then Michael comes in and he tells her that, hey, or she tells him, like, I heard you're staying on. He says that basically the Enterprise ain't going nowhere. It's still down. It's going to be like that way for a little while. So I'm going to be basically having joint custody of this ship with Saru. Because that's the first thing that, Michael's like, yeah, but what about Saru? Does he know that you're taking over his ship once again? And I love that he's being respectful. Like, I ain't gonna shut this man down. Like, we're gonna do it together. I like that as well, because it tells me that Saru's probably gonna be captain for a little while, and then we're gonna get Pike, and then maybe we'll get our real true captain, because eventually the captain has to go to Michael, right? But I don't feel like Michael is in a position to take on a captaincy. I feel like she's still a little too impulsive on some things. She's really good at what she does, but I don't feel like that's her role. Like, the whole time she was captain last year of the Discovery, when she was faking it didn't seem natural to me. It felt like she likes to be on the sidelines or out in the field and doing more of the science stuff. So I don't know if she's ever going to be captain, despite her wanting to be captain when we first met her. I like his line, where do people sit? And she says, Lorca didn't like to encourage discussion. And he says, let's go somewhere else and talk, basically. And we get this long lingering shot, which better be some type of broadcast to the fans that are still waiting for Prime Lorca, or even Mirror Universe Lorca, because we know that Mycelium Network needs to be explored. We need to see Hugh again. So there's different ways that we can bring Lorca back. Even if we don't get Prime Lorca, we can still get some of that character. And like I said, I wish he wasn't so good at being gray. And that's the thing. He was really good at being gray. And I think that there was so much potential for him. That's why people have such a really hard time getting rid. Like, some people are happy he's gone, and that's fine. But fans like me, like I said, he was a huge part of why season 1 was successful. So it kind of gives us a little bit of trepidation in this season on how they can go from there, having such an explosive and dynamic character. And now we're kind of left with, not quite so pushing the envelope characters. So who's going to bring that drama, that excitement, that pizzazz to the screen? And I guess they're going to wait for Georgiou to do it. Like I said, I wish I liked Georgiou. I don't. It reads, though, not every cage is a prison, nor every loss eternal. So keep that in the back mind for the fans. We go back to Michael, which I love that they went to go discourse, but then they just went out in the hallway, so they didn't find no chairs. And they can go ahead and just leave Lorca's captain. The Tribble's gone, and they can leave his room alone, so he can decorate it when he comes back. Burnham tells Pike that she wants to actually go to the U.S. Enterprise to go see Spike, or see Spock, Spike, because she is the reason that they don't go on. After asking him, do you know? Because I know why he didn't come on board. And that's when Pike drops the bomb that actually he's not on Enterprise, Spock that is, that he actually took a leave. And he tells her something interesting, that basically being away from the war for 5 years, which it's hard for me to believe that this was 5 years. So how long, that puts perspective to me, how long was Burnham in jail? Because we know that Yeah, so no, the war started 5 years ago. So yeah, that to me, that gives a lot more depth to what happened in the first season, because damn, that's a long time for Mayor Lorca to be in Prime Universe. So we have that facet, and then the war went on for 5 years. So how long was Michael Burnham in jail? She probably spent most of that time after the mutiny, because she was there at the beginning. So I'm thinking it was only a few months that she was on Discovery. So she spent a really long time in jail before we got her in that transport shuttle. So that time frame puts a lot of different outlook on what we saw in that first season. And he says, 5 years of us being away from the war kind of took a toll on not only Spock, but on myself as well. So I do like that there is some layers to Pike. And he said that Spock basically had to leave because of that. And Michael tries to defend what happened. Like, basically, we kept you guys away because you were, I guess they were that important that they needed to be where they needed to be. And if we needed the Enterprise, we would have called you, and you shouldn't feel bad that you were not involved in the war at all, apparently. Is this something I thought Prime Lorca would feel, that he's been gone for so long? Are we getting some of that territory that Pike is going to be a little bit of a fill-in to what we might expect if his character comes back? He asks, what is the logic of staying away if there's nothing to come back to? So he's kind of letting her know that, yeah, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, we were left in the dark for so long that it kind of caused more anguish, despite, we followed orders, but at the same time, we were on the sidelines watching our friends and our family be involved in something that we could not ourselves be involved in, and that kind of left a little bit of a scar despite us not being involved. And he tells her that Spock is very smart and he's always asking the best questions, but a few months ago he kind of ran into a question he could not answer, and it created a shift in him. And he kept that to himself until about a few months ago as well, where he asked to take a leave. And he said that he had accumulated so much time that he could not deny him that leave. But he does not know when he's coming back, because Michael wants to know, how long is he going to be gone, or how long has he been gone? And Michael still states that she wants to go aboard the Enterprise. And he says, you have to go, after he gets called to the bridge. And he does let her know that, hey, Michael, wherever we do go, wherever this mission is going to take us, let's have fun along the way, okay? Let's ruffle a few feathers. I get it. Kind of like, don't think that we're not going to jump into some shit and have some fun, despite all of what may be weighing us down. We get to the Enterprise and we're in Spock's room. Like I said, she has a huge reverence for Spock. She's touching his stuff. She feels like she's missed him. She hasn't talked to him in years, so I guess if you're close to someone and then you miss them. Again, I can't personally relate to this, and it feels more reverent, especially since they keep going back to the scenes where he first met her and how she looks at him. She kind of looks at him like he's this other person. But I guess if you think about it, you're a human and you come and you encounter someone who is human as well, but not human. So maybe, I don't know why. Did they say why her parents were on Vulcan in the first place? So I don't know. There's a lot of characterization to be explored there. So I'm looking forward to that. She goes onto his personal log, and he is talking about, as a child, Spock that is, he had nightmares. I do like the voice of the actor playing Spock. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about him in person. I'm not too attached to Zachary Quinto's Spock that I'm like, oh, another Spock. I'm okay seeing him younger. I just don't know how younger he's supposed to be compared. Again, I don't know where that does J.J. Abrams, I just say Abrams. Abrams movies are in this timeline, but he is saying that drawing used to help him with his nightmares, but recently the nightmares have returned. It's a vision that he cannot ignore it anymore, and he now knows its meaning. And he has encoded that in this audio file in the event that he dies. So Michael retrieves this information. She seems, whatever, I don't read stars and planets, but whatever she sees, it starts to freak her out a little bit, and she starts tearing up, and she says, Spock, I'm a little late, aren't I? Because he's clearly went off into La La Land, and she says, I don't want to lose you again, brother. So she plans on chasing his ass all over the universe, trying to figure out what the hell is going on with him. And that's how we end our first episode. Again, it was a good, strong reopening, soft reboot for last season where we left off. What we might be seeing this season, I like it. I don't have as much of a mixed bag as I did in the first 15 minutes. Because I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of like, it's a little boring. I was interested in seeing where the characters were at, but I did not. There was nothing that said, "Ooh, Star Trek's back! Woohoo!" So I am happy to see where it goes. Again, they're doing a phenomenal job with the special effects and how they are getting back to maybe the template most people are used to when it comes to this franchise, but also still maintaining some of those elements from last season that really brought in new fans like myself. If you want to send feedback, you can send that to blackgirlcouch@gmail.com. You can find this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean at Black Girl Couch Reviews. Make sure to leave a comment, follow, like. I appreciate it. You can find me on my social medias, on Twitter at ChristinaJ16831 and on Tumblr at Slowly Androgynous Miracle. It's been real, guys. Haunting of Hill House is coming next. Peace.